So the podcast you're about to listen to, we're going to be talking about freelancing and how to set yourself up for success, and some tax implications and bank accounts and legal stuff. And I just want to say at the top here that we are not legal experts. We are not lawyers. We are not financial experts. We are not tax people. These are all just our opinions and things we have seen over the years. So take everything here with a grain of salt. Again, we are not lawyers. Cheers. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Danny Burke, your host. I'm the director of events at Legion AVS and one of the co-founders of Legion. And this is the Legion VODCAST, where we talk about the event and film industry, how to navigate it, and how to be successful in it. And today I've got Mark Baratz, our director of business development and one of the co-founders of Legion as well. We will be bringing in new, different folks from the company and other people as well.
I mean, people have had enough of me so far, so I think people have
had enough of you. I'm going to be here most of the time, but yeah, we want to get in other perspectives and things like that. And one of the things we'll be bringing in is freelancers. And so today we're going to talk about freelancing. We want to talk about the who, what, where, when, why, how. How do you become a freelancer? How do you make it as a freelancer? We use a lot of freelancers, and a lot of our freelancers make a killing because they're great, and they kind of run their own little companies. We pay them to bring them on. They then work for a bunch of other clients as well.
Well, and I think with this industry being so project oriented, it's not possible to do events of certain sizes and scopes and just varying events to the level that it's at without having a pool of really qualified freelancers. Because there are seasonalities, there are all these things, there's a lot of event companies that probably have their books full all the time, but many don't. And there's a lot of niche companies in the industry. So having a proper labor pool that they can pull from of all the specialized folk it's necessary for the industry to be running as it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. The project-based, it's a project-based industry. And I would say even if your show stack is full, you have, a bunch of events, they're all varying sizes. We have events that we cover 100% in-house. We have other events that are giant and we bring in a bunch of freelancers, and we often are somewhere in the middle, right? So yeah, freelancers, for what we do, also, we also work with freelancers, we work for freelancers, I should say, freelance event production or event producers, freelance event planners, event designers. There's a lot of this whole industry is very oriented towards freelancers. But I also see quite a few folks who I don't want to say do it wrong, but don't do it the best that they could, or are not set up to be the most successful. And so we wanted to kind of talk about, how to do that in the best way possible, and how to protect yourself, make as much money as you can, not pay a bunch of extraneous taxes, things like that. I guess I'm going to start by jumping into what is freelancing, really dummy level. So if you're a freelancer in the event industry, that's just the term that the event and film industry uses for independent contractors. So you are an independent contractor. You basically, you're your own boss. You can accept or reject projects as they come to you. If you have a pool of clients, say, hey, I have a project from April 27th to May 5th. Are you available? It's going to be in Dallas, Texas. We're going to fly you out, yada, yada, yada. You can say, yes, I'm available. No, I'm not. I'm doing something else. You basically, you pick your rate, you negotiate your rate, you dictate a lot of things around what your what are your travel conditions like? What do you have any hotel requirements? All these things, they're kind of in your realm rather than being an employee, like a W-2 employee where I say, hey, you're going to this because I'm your boss. And you're,
but we don't do that.
Well, sure. But that's the difference, right? Yeah. It's rather than having a boss who tells you, I'm going to go do this, or you're going to go do this, you kind of can say, I am deciding to do this.
Yeah, you
So
have
I'm saying yes or saying
flexibility
no.
in choosing, and you have flexibility in choosing the type of projects you work on. Like some people are really drawn to, concerts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's something you want to dive into, or like you can hone in on focusing on a few different vendors that you can do the concerts that fit your wheelhouse. Whereas, if you're tied to a single company, you may be doing a lot of different types of events you're not into. And on that front, I feel like a lot of times freelancers, there's like definitely a path as people become better and better. And like for freelancers, typically they start out at a company, and for one reason or another, maybe they really want to focus in on one particular area, and there's just not enough events at that company for them to fulfill that on a full-time basis, or potentially they want to go travel and do events outside of a local market. Some event agencies only fulfill events in a certain area. And let's say you're doing concerts and you're in Illinois and you want to do Coachella.
Oh, Coachella. Yeah. You said Illinois.
Yeah. So like for that, like right there, you start to get, you essentially open up your ability to seek out different events that you think are cool, and you have the opportunity and you have set yourself up to be able to be hired onto them. So it gives you a lot of freedom in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like either like being focused on a particular type of event. Like I said, if like for A1s, for instance, if they don't want to be doing, let's say, corporate speaking engagements, they're really into concerts, like that gives them the flexibility where if they're with a general AV company, there are AV companies focused on concerts only, but let's say you're in a certain situation where like they aren't, it gives you the flexibility to then manipulate your schedule and the events that you're working on to focus in on the category that you want to be best at. Yeah. Whereas if you are W-2, that's not always an option. Sometimes it is, but it's not always.
Yeah. Yeah. You said something a minute ago about how, if you want to be a freelancer and like focus on a certain thing, that you can like start to branch out. And I think that's a really good thing to talk about here too, is like, you don't have to go from, it's not one or the other necessarily, right? Yeah. Like you can definitely be an employee somewhere and have a regular job, or have a job in the shop, or doing whatever, doing events even, and then also be freelancing on the side. You might be working a lot of hours, but like if you want to get your foot in the door and you're not willing to jump in with both feet, you don't have to. You can start, take a job on the weekend, take a job, take a couple days off work to go do a big job, kind of start, just wade in a little bit, get your feet wet, but you don't have to jump right in. But you can, by doing those jobs, you can then build up your book of work and your client base and things like that. And then eventually go full time if you want to. So there's a lot of flexibility. Again, that's the whole thing about freelancing, is the flexibility of it. And
like you said, with that kind of hybrid version, I mean, we have a number of employees that, there's a lot of opportunity for flexibility in this realm. Like for instance, Chris on our team, full time with us, but anytime that we aren't utilize him, he's like number 1, number 2 roster on like Golden One Arena and
Giants,
the Giants. And so there's things like that where like if you're really interested in sports or whatever, there's a ton of opportunity for you to be on that list, but not necessarily. They essentially ask you, are you available to do this? And you can say yes or no.
Right.
So there's no reason you, like, unless your employer's an asshole, there's no reason you couldn't be exploring those options before quitting your job and just like, I'm a freelancer.
Right. Yeah. And I would say would be stressful. So maybe don't jump in with both feet. You can definitely dabble a little bit first. So yeah, that's like what freelancers are. We kind of went deep there. But the thing I want to jump into next is like what positions are good freelance positions, because there are positions that are freelance, like that you can really be successful as a freelancer, and then there are positions that they're more suited towards employee or IATSE or like a labor call type thing. So in my mind, it's kind of like it comes down to like responsibility and leadership. So if you're going to be responsible for a department or for one particular piece of an event or a shoot, then that's probably a freelance position that someone's going to be willing to pay to bring you out to. So whether it's local or not, but so like, like that's a department head. So like audio engineer, A1, V1, L1, lighting designer, grip, key grip, director of photography, director, producer. And inside of all of these, there's like a million. So camera operator, there's like a million like sub departments. I just think video, right? You have video switcher, you have E2 operator, high res operator, graphics operator, LED technician. So there's like a lot of like paths you can navigate. But in general, it is a position with a decent amount of responsibility, where you're like an integral part of the show. And you have to have a level of competency, and the client, say us, have to trust that you're going to do your job to the best of your ability and you're going to care about what you're doing. To go into like the non-freelance jobs, I would say that's more like breakout technician, general event technician, carpenter, unless you're like a head carpenter. So kind of like the more entry-level positions to the event industry, those are more like overhire, or labor calls. So if you're just getting into the event industry, it's great option to go like do IATSE over hire calls, try to get into some event technician positions, and then start learning what you're interested in, right? So if you want to make good, like we have freelancers who legitimately make between $100,000 and $400,000 a year freelancing. They're traveling a lot, but they're pulling in $850, $950, $1,000 a day, and so plus travel costs and other things. So you can make great money doing it, but I would say you have to be pretty specialized in what you're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't say this is true for all the time as far as bringing on freelancers, but I feel like one aspect of it is that it's less of a position where you just show up and like figure it out on the fly. It's very much so you are doing. I mean, that's kind of like what sets a freelancer aside. In fact, that's what the country and state says they need to do. You need to be in charge of your workflow. And so like, that's a pretty clear distinguisher for me. Like, if you're going to be that head of department coming in, you're going to be doing a lot of stuff before you get there, as opposed to when you look at a general tech or, things like that, where they can show up and you can be like, the stage goes there, set up the stage. That's like, something they can do on the fly. They don't need it necessarily debrief outside of your initial project brief at the beginning of the day. But for really good freelancers, chances are like they are doing the pre-production elements involved with it. They are like have their own creative elements that they're bringing to the board, and they're really like helping to amplify the project on their own, not just plugging into the project as another head.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, there's at least typically like a day of pre-production that might be broken out over like a couple meetings or things like that. But that's a really good point. You're going to be in charge and kind of planning, right? You're going to be doing the planning process. So we talked about a little bit there, roles and responsibilities, what makes a good freelance position versus what's not a great freelance position. But also I want to talk about like the pros and cons, which we went into a little bit too, right? So you can make great money, right? You can make I would say there's no barrier for entry. So you don't need a degree in anything. And in fact, there aren't a lot of degrees in a lot of these things. So it's basically, work experience. You can make a lot of money. You can be really flexible. So you can say, hey, you know what? I've been killing it the first 5 months of the year. I'm taking June off. You can do that. That's up to you, right? Or if you say, hey, I've been killing the first half of the year and my fall is already booked up, I'm taking the summer off, whatever, you can do that. That's really, really great. Negatives is basically the exact same thing, right? So it's first of all, it's a hustle. Like you have to be selling yourself. You have to be, a good freelancer. What I say is like, you can be the most technically savvy person in the room, but if you're an asshole, you're not going to get hired. So you have to be, very technically good at what you're doing. You also have to be friendly. You have to be good at communicating. You have to be selling yourself to these people. You go on a big job with, a bunch of other freelancers. You want to connect to all of those freelancers and say, hey, if you need a whatever position you are, or you need a video technician, like I'm great. Like let's work together. So you have to be constantly selling yourself and getting yourself out there. And that's the hustle can be a grind. I would also say you obviously have the lack of stability. I would freelance in my early 20s, and I would always try to be 8 weeks booked out. Like at least I got my next 8 weeks planned out. But it would happen where it'd be like, crap, my job ends in a week and a half and I got nothing lined up. So like it can be very stressful. So if you just be aware that that's like something, if you're going to get in the realm, like you're going to have to hustle, and like you're going to have downtimes, like the pandemic in particular, like that was rough for a lot of folks.
Like you are essentially all aspects of the business, and including the product, like the service and all the other elements of it. So like one big part of that is
you're running a small little business.
Yeah, exactly. Yourself. And so one big part of it is like sales. Yeah. You have to sell yourself. You don't have a department feeding you. And so like, that's one of the trade-offs, and many people can, like you have to be good at networking. You have to do all the same things as if you were essentially running the business on your own, but you're just a business.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be, the hustle is real. I would say, going from that to like what makes a great freelancer to me, is kind of those things that we just talked about. So you're very competently skilled, very competent. You're very technically skilled in whatever you're doing. You'll take accountability for the job you're doing and responsibility for it, and then you'll communicate well. So if I can't communicate with you, or if you're again great at your job, but like you don't respond to my texts or my emails or my phone calls, like probably not going to work. If you are super nice but not great at what you're doing, probably not going to work. So you do have to be this combination of things. And the biggest one to me is accountability. If you give me an excuse, if something goes wrong, say you miss a cue on a show, and then you're like, well, we didn't rehearse that. You know what? That's then either you didn't rehearse it or you weren't ready for it. Whereas if you just said, hey, I just made a mistake, so sorry, it won't happen again, it's gone. Like, I'm not even going to think about it again. Okay, yep, you made a mistake. We've learned from it. It's not going to happen again. If you give me an excuse, you're out. All right, so now we talked about what a freelancer is, kind of the positions, pros and cons a little bit. So now I want to get into a little bit about like how to set yourself up as a freelancer, because again, I see a lot of young folks and people getting into the industry doing it in not the best of ways for themselves. And I mean, myself included, early on, I definitely didn't do any of these things, but now I know better. So there's a couple categories here that I think are really great things to do that cost a little bit of money. Some do, some don't. But in the long run, and even the short and medium run, will make you money. So one, set up an LLC. We'll get into it, but that's super, super important, just for tax benefits and liability reasons. Two, get insurance. Just get a general liability policy, just like a blanket $1 million policy. You can get them for as low as like $30 a month. Really cheap, especially if it's just for you. And worth doing.
Just one note there is like those are required.
They're required. They're required, but it's not enforced, right?
Yeah.
So like this is the thing that like it's required, but first of all, nobody's telling anybody this stuff, right? So like if you don't have insurance, like you could get in big trouble if something goes wrong. Again, it's not super enforced, and it's not super accessible. Like that knowledge is, probably half of the folks that I've interacted with don't, but they should. The last thing, and I think we'll get more into that in general, just the insurance thing.
Yeah.
The last thing is taxes and a CPA. I said form an LLC. If you do a sole proprietorship, you get a mandatory 15% self-employment tax, which is that's 15% right off the bat. Like no other tax savings, you're saving 15% immediately by forming an LLC. So that's so very worth it. In California, it's $800. Basically like a minimum, like you pay a minimum tax of $800. So it's not like a fee, it goes towards your taxes. So, but I mean, if you do $20,000, you're going to pay that anyway. So you should just do it. And then also, again, you get the liability protection of having an entity. So say a light falls on somebody and you get sued, they're suing the entity, they're not suing you directly. So it's worth doing. And then get a CPA. This one, again, this one I could see being like maybe not the first year, like maybe the second year, but find a CPA, have them help you with your taxes because they will save you money.
Well, and like, especially for freelancers, because there are so many things you can be tracking that you're probably not aware of. And like that there are systems around that you can track easily. But if you don't do it, you're not getting those write-offs.
Right. Exactly. You're not getting those write-offs. So you're losing money. Right. Yeah. So if you have, like, we have a CPA, shout out to Scott. I think we pay him, I mean, between $4,000 and $10,000 a year. I don't know exactly anymore, but I mean, we're also we're an entire production company. We're in a 15,000 square foot space.
A gross amount of transactions.
We have a gross amount of transactions. So, but even still, I feel like for the first couple of years we paid him, it was like $4,000. And now, like, I mean, he's saved us tens of thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah.
Like by letting us know about new tax laws, tax incentives, tax law changes, write-off categories. When Trump made the meals 100% write-off, like that way. Oh, okay. Well, it normally is 50%. So now it's 100%. Now it's back to 50%. But there's just a ton of incentives that your CPA will help you. And even if you're spending $4,000 or $5,000, they're going to save you that and then some.
And I think in that same vein, part of it is knowing like how to properly track and record all of your write-offs. And then the biggest part, I think, is, I mean, everybody is susceptible to getting an audit.
Yes.
And having it not be all on you, like that CPA stamp, like that goes a long way. And then having somebody in your court to be able to help you navigate, let's say something did, because it could happen to anybody. You have all your systems in place, they can help you. Whereas if not, you could end up being out of a significant amount of time and potentially taking a significant hit in fees.
Yeah. And I would say both of those things, but especially time. If you have a CPA and you get audited, your CPA is going to deal with it.
Yeah.
You're going to have to ask some questions or, answer some questions and deal with some things. But in general, it's not going to be on your plate. It's going to be on their plate, and they're going to tell you the steps you need to take. Last thing I have on this one is bank account. You should have, once you've created an LLC, you should open a bank account and have all of your money flowing into that account. So anything that's coming from freelance work goes into that bank account, and then you can pay yourself out of that bank account, and then just tracking wise, very, very valuable. So if you want to be a freelancer, to recap, form an LLC, get general liability insurance, find a tax person, open a business bank account. Those are my 4 big things that you should do.
And just one additional thing on the bank account is that there's so many tools now that make getting paid so easy, whether it's Square. QuickBooks accepts payments like directly through it. So like you could be doing your accounting and also be doing your invoicing through QuickBooks. And one thing it does allow is an easy way for clients to pay you via credit card, which, there are fees associated, but often clients will pay. Often
I'll pay 3% if I can pay you on a credit card.
And then you can get paid sooner. It is much easier to swipe the credit card than it is to go through
I have this
accounts payable.
A thing I wanted to talk about is payment terms and ease of payment and how beneficial that is to freelancers. So I mean, we'll come back to payment terms, but just to jump in, absolutely. For all of these things, create a bank account and then create a QuickBooks account. It is very low effort. QuickBooks is, again, almost free. It's very cheap for a basic QuickBooks online plan. And then if you can finish your job, get home, spend an hour tallying up your receipts, and then send me an invoice, I am almost certainly going to pay that invoice as soon as I see it, because I just don't want to, I don't want to forget. I don't want to, I got to, deal with all, if you send me an invoice that I have to pay by check or ACH, then it's like a process. I have to send it to accounts payable. I got to do all this stuff. I got to, write the check, sign the check, whatever. Whereas if it's a credit card payment, I click it. I click Apple Pay or I click, pay by credit card. I do my thing, done. You're going to be paid within 2 days of me getting that invoice.
Yeah. And like, for instance, for us, like we pay our vendors when we run our payroll, which is 2 times per month. So depending on when you hit, like, you know, depending on your terms, you're losing your flexibility in terms of payment, like pretty significantly. Whereas if you send the invoice, like you said, with the card swipe situation, we could pay that instantly. And with the fees, like, I mean, I don't know anybody who's terribly opposed to paying those fees for the ease of use for everybody.
Well, and it's usually, you know, our freelancers are usually, you know, 1,000 to, I mean, you know, 10,000 on the high end. So like even $10,000, a 3% fee or a 2.7, like that's $300. I'm probably going to be willing to pay that for your $10,000 of service.
And to get those Amex points.
To get those Amex points. And also I will say another benefit of doing credit card payments is that makes our lives easier on taxes and stuff, because we don't have to file a 1099 for you. If we pay you by credit card, then the credit card company will send you a 1099. That's a hot tip right there.
Yeah.
It's very nice. It's one less thing we have to do. It makes you a more desirable freelancer. So yeah, I'd say being able to accept credit card payments make you a more desirable freelancer. Absolutely, from somebody who hires freelancers. All right, payment terms to circle back around. How should you structure, as a freelancer, how should you structure your payment terms? This one is really, really flexible. To me, you always want to try to get a deposit up front, 25% or 50%, just something to, especially if you're going to be covering your own airfare and stuff. Try. Sometimes people say no. Like, I mean, for us, like if it's like, honestly, most people don't ask. But I would absolutely pay a 25 or 50% deposit up front. It doesn't come up very often, but I think it should. Most of our vendors and freelancers are we have very tight relationships with them. So like, there's no worry about if we're going to pay them. We always pay our vendors, and we always pay them pretty quickly. But definitely, if you're working with someone new, ask for a deposit, get a deposit up front. And then generally, I would say you should do upon receipt. That's not going to be paid immediately unless it's via credit card. But that's like, you know, typically a due upon receipt, that's going to be sent to accounts payable immediately. And then it's going to be paid, you know, on their next payroll cycle, or you know, it's going to be paid within those 2 weeks to 30 days. Whereas if you do like net 30, depending on how the company operates, they're going to say, oh, I'm going to send this to accounts payable in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or any time before that net 30. And that's fine, except then accounts payable takes 2 weeks, and then you don't end up getting paid for net 45.
Well, yeah, and it's really it's a double-edged sword, because there is value in having that payment come through, like on a net 30, especially for, I think, payment terms that you're getting as the client hiring the vendors is very important to take into account, because like we do with our clients, we push for a deposit, and then, you know, we do a due upon receipt. But sometimes you need to have I think the most important part is having that set up as your structure. You're showing up and saying, hey, this is how I operate, this is what I want. But like, have the conversation with them to say, like, if they're not getting paid for a net, you know, 60, and we've heard net 90s before, you know, be open to just trying to be as flexible as you can if it's a good opportunity. So
that's a good point. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, definitely don't send an invoice and then the next day be like, why isn't this paid yet? Right. So definitely. Well, I mean, you should have conversations, but typically I would say if you do a due upon receipt, you will be paid typically within 30 days of sending that invoice.
And at least you can say, like, let's say, even if you were willing to do net 30, do the due upon receipt. Because then, like, let's say, you know, if 2 weeks go by, you can go and call and be like, hey, this was due upon receipt. As opposed to if you did the net 30, they'll be like, no, we got 13 hours left.
Yeah.
Like, well,
yeah, I'd say due upon receipt, and then you're going to be a little bit flexible there. Absolutely. Last things, wrap ups for freelancing. Get out there, go do it. Find what you think is interesting, and then pursue that. and work is, in my opinion, I started by doing every job I could. So I did audio, I did lighting, I did video stuff, I did rigging, I did scenic fabrication. Do it all, you know, get out there, find what you like, find what you can nerd out on, and then pursue that.
It's such a cool opportunity because let's say, for instance, like, let's say you were really into concerts and you love Taylor Swift, right? For us as a business, very unlikely in the near term we're gonna get Taylor Swift's concerts. But for you as a freelancer, I mean, you have every opportunity in the world. So I mean, like, if you're looking out and you're really into a certain category, like this is an industry where if you're good, if you build up your network and you want to go do something, if you want to go work on a specific project, you can do that.
Yeah.
It's there's not a lot of barriers that are stopping you from getting in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're, I have a saying that there's always room for one more good one. If you're good, there's room for you. Right?
Yep.
There's room for you in the industry if you can be good at what you're doing and do it with a passion and care about what you're doing. There's room for you.
Let's touch base real quick on day rate terms.
Day rate terms, that's a great idea. I would say the industry standard is 10 hours. So if your day rate is $500, that means I get you for 10 hours. There's some ambiguity around if that includes meals. I would say, in my experience, that includes a meal break. So 10 hours with a meal break in there. So essentially that's, you know, if you're doing $500, that's $50 an hour. Because a lot of the times we're going to be eating at our desks. We're going to, you know, stop and eat a pizza or whatever, right? Like you're not going to get a true walk away hour, show. Especially with show days. You know, if you're in a general session from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., like you're in show. There's not a lot of time for breaks. So a day rate covers that, assuming you're going to get fed, but you know, it might not be like a full 1 hour walk away. So your day rate is basically, you know, $500 a day. Your hourly rate is 1/10 of that. So $500 a day, $50 an hour. Then hours 10 to 14 are time and a half typically, and then anything after 14 is double time. There are a million things, you know, short turns, yada yada. That's all stuff that you should have and think about, you know, in terms. And that's something else we haven't talked about really, is like, do you have a standard operating agreement? And what's that look like? That is definitely something that is great to have, but it's not super accessible. Maybe that's something we should look at releasing, honestly, is like a standard operating agreement for freelancers. Like, hey, these are my terms, because that'd be
well,
great
and I also think that it's similar to what was I going to say? It's similar to your payment terms in the sense that like lay out what you would like, and then have the conversation around it. But I think you're doing yourself, like, you got to stand up for yourself, and some people are going to take advantage of you. And so like, I would be, write it in there. And, you know, if you're okay with some things, you know, with adjusting after the fact, if the conversation takes place, then do that. And if, you know, for instance, somebody tries to take complete advantage of you, you should have your standing, this, you know, be like, this is my terms. I laid them out. We had a conversation which you agreed upon. So you're protecting yourself.
Yeah.
And like,
and anybody who doesn't want to sign, like what I always say is like, if somebody's not willing to sign, it's not somebody you want to work with. Like I've worked with a couple folks who are like, oh, we operate on handshakes. And it's like, well, if you're a trustworthy person, then you're willing to sign, right? Like there's no problem putting a signature to this. Like
that's very true. It's very contradictory. There's like, yeah,
like I'm a handshake guy too. Like I'll shake, but like also just sign the contract. There's nothing wrong with that.
So I mean, documentation is protect yourself, like you would, you know, like it's to protect you, and you should be, you know, like a lot of times people know how events go. Like, I mean, you got to work with the flow of the show. But with that, you know, like you should definitely be fed. You should definitely have these things. You should definitely not be working 24 hours straight. And if you are, you should be getting your compensation.
Yes.
And so writing that out just helps protect you, so that, like, you know, let's say you left for 2 hours and you came back, that, you know, like you can protect yourself from somebody being like, well, it's a new day.
It's a new day. Yeah.
It's a new day. The next day is the new day.
You got to go to your hotel and shower. Like that counts.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen it all. So like people, if you're not very clear with what you want and like what your expectations are and have it in writing, then you could be taking advantage of.
Yeah. So I'm going to circle back up. A con of freelance work is you do not have employee protections, right? As a W-2 employee, you get protections under the law. Like as an employer, I cannot take advantage of you. You have to be paid for this. You have to, you have to have a meal break per X number of hours. You have to provide water if it's hot. There's a lot of protections for employees. As a freelancer, none of those apply to you. So you have to make sure you're advocating for yourself. And it allows you flexibility because, some of those laws are a little silly, but a lot of them are very, very important.
I wonder, like, this almost makes this gets to a much bigger topic that, like, maybe we touch on for just a second, but being that that's kind of how the industry shaped up, pretty shady. Like, I feel like, it's kind of like totally. Writing was on the wall. Like they're like, no, this is industry standard. Well, that's convenient. Yeah. That
your standards are fucked up.
Yeah, that nobody ever gets a break because they're all contractors, but they don't have any of the protections they need to be a contractor. It's an interesting conversation in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think, there's a reason IATSE exists. There's a reason California cracked down on this because it was and is a problem. I mean, I worked with a younger guy who worked for a company in Northern California. I don't know the name of the company. And he said he was on day 100 waiting for pay. And I said, are you an employee or are you a contractor? And he said, well, I'm an employee, but it's all 1099. And I go,
so you're not.
So you're a contractor. Yeah. And, he was 23 or 24 and like just getting completely taken advantage of because like you can in this industry. And like there are shady companies out there. And so like, definitely
and I'd say,
protect yourself.
I don't know if I'd say that, I mean, you can very much bring that up too. Like if that is not, in California at least, they can get in trouble.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. In California, and other states now as well, if you are getting brought on as an event technician or as basically as an employee without like, doing true, like if you don't have a business, if you don't have insurance, you technically are an employee. If you're doing employee work, and there's some very specific language around that of like, are they telling you where to go? Are they telling you what to do or how to do your job? Things like that. Like you should be getting either W-2 employee protections or you should be getting probably paid more. So if somebody's paying you like an hourly rate of like $15 or $20 an hour as a 1099, that's probably illegal in California.
If the employer is pitching to you that you're going to be a 1099 contractor, I would say that's incorrect.
Right.
Because unless you are a 1099 contractor, you should not be getting placed in that category because you're signing away a lot of your protections.
That's a really good point.
And like legally, I'm pretty certain they can't do that in California, but it happens. In California, it happens.
And I will say, like when we started out in 2016, that's how we did it. 2015, sorry. We hired our friends and stuff as 1099 contractors because we just straight up couldn't afford all of the payroll tax and all of those things, and we didn't know any better. And also, it was not law at that time that these rules have been changed since then, and now we are very, very strict on following them.
And I think the good news is that the people that we had then, where it's your brother, my best friend.
They were our best friends, my family.
I mean, none of us were making any money.
None of us were making any money.
Well, we weren't making any money. they were making pretty good money. Yeah. So
that's very true. All right. So thank you all so much for being here. This is such a great topic because there's this whole industry is built on freelancers, like I said at the top. So I would love to hear your, experiences, your, things you operate with. If you have a standard operating agreement, how you do things, how it is in your state. If you are, if you do think, oh, hey, maybe I am an employee and shouldn't be 1099. Like, I want to hear about it. I want to hear, how much do you charge a day? What are your overtime rates? All of those things, your payment terms. And then also if you're a freelancer and want to, get on our overhire list, reach out.
I was going to say, absolutely.
Love to have, we're always looking for great talent.
And
anybody
video
engineers, whatever.
Anybody who's maybe looking to do the jump, like, we're happy to help.
Totally.
And like, we'll be the first one. I mean, if you're good, we're happy to, give you the resources, and then we're happy to put you on the list. I mean, like I said, we with our project scopes fluctuating so much, like, having that roster is so important. So, I mean, like, feel free to call, feel free to send a resume. We'd love to add you to our list. I mean, the more the merrier.
And also, I guess last thing is, what are your pain points? And like, should we develop a standard operating agreement for freelancers? I don't think we have one right now, but like, I would love to, create some documents and things to help people in this industry. So if there's something that you're like, man, that would be really great, like, maybe we can get some people on it. I would love to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
all right.
Catch y'all later.
Thanks.